Hi, welcome everyone to Reuse Minnesota's webinar about strategically reopening your business. We're so happy to have you here today. My name is Jenny Kedward. I'm the president of Reuse Minnesota, and this is one of a series of webinars that we're hoping gives you more information about dealing in these times, in these COVID-19 times, of working with your customers and your internal operations. I'm so excited that we have a great panel today of nonprofits and donation centers that are going to talk us through their operations and being strategic about their reopening within the next few weeks, I believe. So first I'll introduce everybody, and then we'll do round robin style where we'll have some questions. You can definitely ask your own questions. We encourage that. There is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. You should see Q&A or the chat box. You can use either to ask questions, and I'll take those questions and make sure the panelists get them. So with that, let's dive in. First we'll start with Steve Jameson from Bridging, and then we'll go to Greg Rue from Arc Value Village, and then we'll talk to Jen, who is representing the Habitat Restore. So Steve, will you get us kicked off, please?
There we go. There. Good morning. Yeah, my name is Steve Jameson. I'm the Operations Logistics Manager at Bridging. We're a nonprofit furniture bank here in the Twin Cities. We're one of the largest furniture banks in the country. So we take in used furniture and household goods, and we give it away to families that are referred to us by a little over 200 social service agencies around the Twin Cities. So we had ceased operations the 18th of March. We have reopened as of this week. We were designated as an essential service about the second week of April. And it's taken us that long to get all the policies and procedures in place that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But it's great to be open, at least in a limited fashion. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that later.
Welcome, Steve. All right, Greg, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Greg Rue. I am the manager of thrift businesses for Arc's Value Village thrift stores and donation centers. We are also a nonprofit. We take in donations from the community. We sell them in our retail stores, and the money that we raise goes to the Arc Minnesota, whose purpose is to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We also closed on March 18th in response to COVID, and have had to furlough our staff at our retail stores and have been just waiting to when we could reopen. We had very limited staff at our stores, kind of prepping things, making sure there were no fires or water leaks or anything on those lines. And most recently, we've really been looking at how we're going to prep for reopening our retail. Based on some of the guidelines that were offered, we are going to open our donation centers this coming Sunday, May 10th, Mother's Day. And we will reopen with the hours of 10 to 6 p.m. weekly at this point. And I can go into more of that later on. So I think that's all for now.
Wonderful. All right, Jen, would you talk about Restore, please?
Hi, I'm Jen Newberg, and I'm the Executive Director with Reuse Minnesota. And I just got off the phone, unfortunately, with Pete O'Keefe from the Habitat Restores, and he was pulled away, but he was able to provide us with some insights to share during the webinar today, and I think we'll find them really helpful. The Habitat Restores are not currently open for business like many other resale stores, but there's some insight that they have actually they actually have a network of 1,000 other restores across the country. So I hope that as we progress and answer the questions, we can bring in some of that, knowledge and insight and wisdom from those Habitat stores as well. As you may know, the Habitat resale stores were actually in a process of expanding during during this shutdown. So Pete did let me know that in the last few weeks, their staff, they haven't had any volunteers in the stores, but their staff have really taken over getting that, getting their new and expanded store ready to open when they can. So they've had this added level of complication in the fact that they had a project moving forward that that they tried to move forward as much as they can while not open for consumer business.
Thank you, Jen, and thanks for filling in for Pete. Okay, we'll start with our round robin questions, and again, feel free to add your own questions as well in the chat box. The first ones, for safely reopening, let's talk staffing, especially volunteers, which we know you rely on, and your own staff who have higher vulnerability for the virus. What are your strategies for keeping staff safe? And what about customers? Additional strategies to keep your customers safe? Let's start, we'll go back to Steve.
Okay, yeah, our operation is pretty face-to-face intensive with our clients, with our volunteers especially, and obviously with our staff. So we have been working for 6 weeks on coming up with a plan as to how to handle each facet of that operation. First of all, our clients, they normally get to come into one of our 2 warehouses and actually shop for all of the items they need to set up what we call a basic home setup. So all their living room, dining room, bedroom furniture, all of this type of thing, all their dishes, pots and pans, lamps, everything that they need. And so obviously, as we're looking through this, and we knew when we reopened, we were going to have to have a lot of safeguards in place. So we have reopened in a little different way. So the clients are not coming into the warehouses. We're doing our shopping over video or by what we call a preference sheet. So they fill out a very detailed preference sheet of the type of things and we're shopping for them. And then right now they're coming to pick up their own furniture. We are at this point not doing deliveries. We delivered about 3/4 of the furniture that went out the door previously. And we've ceased deliveries right now. We are working on a plan to be able to reopen that hopefully sometime in June. But that was one of the things we had to look at when we're talking about keeping our employees safe, because we do all the deliveries by employees. Also, we have about 800 regular volunteers that volunteer in our 2 buildings. We have about 40 volunteers every morning that are in our buildings, doing everything from sorting through all the boxes of bags that come in and getting things out of the shelf. They're working in our warehouse alongside of our employees. They're in our shops testing all the electrical appliances that come in. They're in our wood shop doing minor repairs and refinishing on some of the furniture in that. We are not allowing our volunteers back in right now. We do have a plan for on the 18th of allowing some of them to come back in some key areas that we need some help in as we sort of ramp up. And then hopefully our plan is sometime the 1st of June that we'll be able to have more of a regular schedule. It's still going to be somewhat limited. Out of those 800 volunteers, we know that right now only about 25 to 30% of them are ready to come back, because that's the other part of this, is just people's perception and their understanding of this, and also the fact that a lot of our volunteer base is a little older and a lot of times are in more of a vulnerable situation. So we're preparing to go through this without them as we ramp up the operations. Right now we're about 40% of the normal amount of clients that we see in a given week, and we hope to slowly ramp that up over the next couple of months. But in order to keep our employees safe and the volunteers safe, we've instituted strict cleaning processes for our offices, for our warehouse, for our equipment, for our vehicles, for all of those things. And we're going through and sanitizing everything twice a day. And, to keep that, that part of it as safe as we can. All of our employees are wearing masks, and the volunteers will as well. Anytime when you're in proximity with anybody else. So in other words, when we may be in our office like I am right now by myself, I may not have a mask on, but as soon as I step out the door into the common areas, we're going to be wearing masks. And as you've heard, that's more for the protection of other people than it is for us, but it's just an understanding that's what we need to do. So at the drop-off doors, as people are bringing in things, I mean, we're also wearing masks. So that's the sort of the basis of what we're doing to keep people safe.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, let's hop over to Greg.
I'm going to say a lot of the same things that Steve was saying, but I will kind of run down our list as well. So on the staffing side, we've done a few different things. And it's for multiple reasons, but we have shortened our hours. We are going to open our donation center. I'd mentioned this Sunday, but we're going to have reduced hours. We're going to only open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday through Saturday. So it will be 7 days. But that does allow us to just have one shift of staff on site. And we're bringing back our supervisors and our leads first to cover this initial kind of opening testing ground. And then as we ramp up different things that we're going to do, we'll be bringing back more of our staff, or, we're just trying to get a feel for how busy, what the volume's going to look like, those kinds of things. So that was kind of step one. The other things, a lot of similar things to Steve. We're going to ask that donors stay in their vehicle. I'm sorry, we're kind of starting on the customer side of things. I'm getting thrown off. On the customer side, we're looking at a lot of what the retailers are doing right now, what our grocery stores are doing, and those kinds of things. So we've already been prepping inside of our stores. We're trying to find points where people tend to congregate and limit those. We're putting up the plastic at our registers. We're going to really push taking only credit card payments, just to limit that cash piece and that additional touching, and who knows where cash has been. What things that we're a little bit hung up on at this point are some of the numbers of people that can be in an area together. Our stores tend to rely on a lot of people in a store at a time, so reducing that, we're trying to figure out those. But we're doing many of the same things that Steve was talking about. We're going to limit our staff currently in our stores to 10. We're actually going to require that they always wear masks. We're going to be more in communal areas. We don't have a lot of people that would be in an office setting at all during this. We're increasing our cleaning, a lot of disinfectant, a lot of hand sanitizer around. We're going to have mandatory wash your hand breaks. I'm trying to think of some of the other things. I didn't have my stuff all written down. So maintain the social distancing. All of those pieces are the things that we're considering right now. And we too have the same issues with our volunteers, but as well as some of our staff fall into that vulnerable high risk category. That's another reason why we're kind of being slow to bring back all of our staff, but we're very conscious of people that have pre-existing. A lot of folks that have a disability tend to, it's not an all the time thing, but some of our folks that have disabilities also have these, pre-existing or fall into that high risk category. So we're very aware of them. A lot of our volunteers are in that older generation as well. So again, they're at the higher risk. So we're going to be very cautious when we bring back those volunteers, and we're continuing to figure out what that will look like, so that we can at some point bring them back. I think I covered everything. Was there something else I missed? Okay.
No, I think that's good. And we do have some questions that have come in. We'll go through to complete our panel, and then I'll ask the questions that came in. So Jen, do you want to speak about these questions, or these? Do you want to answer these questions for Restore?
Kind of from my conversations with Pete, I think the only thing new that he has to add is, the Habitat Restore does primarily sell some larger items, and in this time they have looked into, trying to do some online sales, but have just found, to try to balance that with the time and effort required to kind of move to online. So at this point, their stores still are closed, and they're thinking about, Obviously, the timeline, we can't say when that timeline will be when they'll open, because they'll shift all the time, but they're hoping for sometime in June. The other thing is, I think because they're connected to 1,000 other restores across the country, they are really paying attention to what's working in those stores. And again, what's working in retail, and specifically the toolkit that Target released earlier this week. That is also kind of just providing some baseline guidelines to having customers re-enter stores. So just thinking about that in terms of any other retail business, they're just trying to follow some kind of standard guidelines, which in some ways there are differences, but that at least provides, you know, a baseline of things that they can plan on.
You're muted, Jenny.
Thank you, faux pas, webinar faux pas. So we have a few questions about donations, but we'll get to those in a second. One question for Steve. For bridging, when volunteers are allowed back in, will you be able to let some clients in to shop in person?
You're also still muted, Steve.
I know, we should have the hang of it.
I remember to do that. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, those two things will not happen necessarily at the same time. We are taking some of our cues for our clients from the agencies that refer clients. Most of those agencies right now are not working face-to-face with their clients. A lot of them are still working at home. They're doing video. They're, you know, this type of thing. So a lot of that's going to be based on that. When they start seeing more of their clients face-to-face, going out and doing some home visits, things like that, then we'll probably open that up. It could happen before that, but we will need to have some things happen with getting a few more volunteers in the building and things like that before we're able to. And then very frankly, some of it is going to be dependent on what we hear from the medical experts and all that as far as how things are progressing. And, you know, it is just diligently following all of the guidelines we're setting up here to make sure that we're keeping everybody as safe as possible.
Great, thank you. So the next round of questions will be centered around accepting donations. So a few of you asked about that too. So for donations, we'll start with Greg. So I'll give you a heads up, Greg. Where is that? How are you planning to manage higher than normal volumes of donations? As we all know, we've gotten a lot of questions from people stuck at home, decluttering, cleaning. We're waiting for the onslaught. So how will you deal with that? And do you need to quarantine items at all? What guidelines have you been told by MDH and other medical professionals about quarantines? We'll start with Greg.
Super. And if you don't mind, I'm going to quick step back to retail sales. I totally forgot. We are going to try some online sales. We can do curbside pickup, as the governor has mentioned. But the most exciting piece of all of that is we realized that we could do our virtual shopper through, you know, Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. So we are going to try and test that and launch that as soon as we possibly can, because I mean, what a great thing to be able to do that. Similar to you know, Steve and Bridging being able to show people what they can get at their stores too. So wanted to throw that out there. So look for us online as well. As far as our donation piece, which we've been thinking a lot more about, a few things that are going to change a little bit. One, our biggest thing is that we're going to advertise for people is if you are sick, stay home. You know, we don't even want you coming through our donation line if you're not healthy and feeling well. The next piece of that is we're going to ask our donors to stay in their vehicles and not even come into contact or get near our staff. Let us do all of the work handling, unloading those donations. Another piece, which I know might shock a few people, we're actually asking that all donations be inside of a bag or a box, and we'd prefer it sealed. most people, I don't think, understand that a lot of times we take their donation and we can't just run it in and put it out on the sales floor. It has to be put in storage for a period of time, whether COVID is around or not. When it's loose and you just threw it in the back of your trunk, it makes it really difficult for us to handle, deal with, manage that, and even more so now, during this time when we have to be more careful on contact and all of that. So we're asking folks to bag it, box it, and then label it with, in our case, the ARC, so that we know what items to take out of the vehicle. Again, people leave their golf clubs and everything, their briefcase, everything mix in with their donations, and then 2 weeks later they go, oh, hey, you took something that you weren't supposed to. So labeling is going to be another big key of that, so that we know what to take. And as far as the donor side, that's, again, we're trying to limit the contact with that person as much as we can. We'll leave a donation receipt in their back seat or their trunk, so we're not even touching or handing that to them as well. From there, our plan at this point is to take the donations and at least try to quarantine them for a day or two. We think that, the other piece of all of this is that our buildings aren't limitless. They're not huge. They're not big warehouses. They're mostly sales floor. So there isn't a lot of extra space to put items, to manage them and hold them. Luckily, because our retail side is not open, we have some semi-trailers on most of our sites that we will be able to put a lot of the donations in to manage them for a day or two, and then we will have staff do some processing. Probably not ideal, because I know COVID apparently can stay active on different types of surfaces for different lengths of time, and we're talking about a day or two, and there's a few items that it can live on for multiple days. But it's at least a starting point. Then people that are touching donations, again, will be wearing gloves, hand sanitizing, hand washing, doing all those pieces to limit the virus actually coming into contact with them, or their face, hands, mouth, nose, kinds of things. I think that was all the donation piece of it. The higher volume. Again, our hours are going to be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We are expecting higher than normal volumes, and our word to the donors is, if you're coming that first day, second day, you are going to be waiting in lines. We are not going to be trying to move as fast as we can. We are going to be trying to be moving safely and again, maintaining that social distancing. So we are going to be more cautious taking donations for the next, going forward. So
Great,
good.
Thank you, Greg.
Yep.
We'll hop over to Steve. Same questions, please.
Yeah, like Greg said, the changes we are making are not just for right now. This is going to be the foreseeable future. In some instances, we have sort of torn down our model and we're rebuilding it in a new way, because we know this is going to be with us for quite a while. As far as on the donation side, we got a couple different things. Like Greg said, people are going to have to be patient. When we had a full staff and a lot of volunteers, we could unload 3, 4, 5 vehicles at a time in certain, ways. We're not going to be able to do that. We have routed all of our donations to actually, in Roseville especially, to a different door that we were even using before. And in Bloomington, routing it through the parking lot so we don't have a backup in the street. And it will be unloading one vehicle at a time. Because we're dealing with a lot of times bigger items than Greg would be. That is going to take manpower, and we're doing exactly what they're doing. Is we are recommending that the donors stay in their vehicle. We have signs right out front to maintain the 6-foot social distancing, and we will take the items out of the car or truck or whatever they come in with. We do have a system set up in our warehouses for quarantining. We've got some extra storage pods and trailers on in our warehouses here that we can use for this as we move forward. What we found and everything we're reading from the CDC, this virus can live for different lengths of time on different items. What we are doing right now is any furniture that comes in with a hard surface, whether it's wood furniture, or like lamps, part of a lamp, we are actually disinfecting that right away. We have an area that goes that will go into, and then we have employees as soon as they can get back. We are able to disinfect that and be able to put that into our normal storage or onto the floor as soon as we can. When it comes to upholstered furniture, any soft surfaces, that is being quarantined for at least 2 days. That seems to be the common theme with that is 48 hours. The virus does not live as well on those type of surfaces. But right now the plan is 48 hours. And under normal circumstances, it's probably going to be longer than that, but it's going to be at least 48 hours. For all of the smaller items we get in, which will come in bags and boxes, those things are being palletized, and we are quarantining those for 5 days. And not because on the bag or box, the virus won't live that long, but we don't know what's in the bag or box until we go to sort it. And if it's glass or some sort of dishes, pottery, things like that, there's a lot of variations on how long that virus is going to live, but there are certain things that they suspect it could live up to 5 days. Now understand, by the time we get to the 5th day, there's not much left on a piece. It's not like bacteria that grows. It actually starts dying on that surface as soon as it hits it. So that risk goes down dramatically after a day or 2 days. But as long as we can, we're going to keep that for 5 days before we put it in. Once again, that normally would happen probably anyway, just because of the volume of things that come in. So again, it's just different ways of handling each different thing. So yeah, again, a lot of those same things just to keep people the 6 feet away. We're wearing masks at the dock door, and then we're just being careful how we handle things as they come in the door.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, same questions, Jen, for the Restore.
Well, Pete in our conversation shared that while their Restore isn't open, they are accepting donations, but only through where they started with their corporate kind of dock-to-dock donations. So the partners they already had with businesses who were donating kind of really solid Restore items, they started those up with, again, pretty contactless dock-to-dock pickups. And then they have started their curbside pickup again, and that is like a single driver in a truck pickup, not going into anyone's home, but really, so they are kind of growing their inventory without their Restore being open. And then Pete said that they in the past they had a 24-hour kind of processing time between picking up their donation or receiving the donation and getting it into the Restore, and that has extended to 4 days. So that's what they're planning on right now. And again, I think their team is also just, as I think everyone is, just open to new information, and the new information that comes up might change that process. So, but that's what they're thinking about planning for as they continue with donations.
Great, thank you. And I will put this to anyone that can speak. What do you use to disinfect your hard surfaces? Is anyone considering UV lights or other mechanisms to kill with UV rays?
I can speak that a little bit. We don't have any real good evidence that is, going to work that well, and it also is a very difficult thing to do. We are using, actually, we're fortunate. We have one of our supporters here and a tenant of our building in Roseville is actually Bent Distillery, and Bent has changed over to making hand sanitizer. They're in full operation, so we've been able to get all that we need from them. That sanitizer is a liquid, is what they're making, so you can actually use that on surfaces as well as for your hands. We spent a lot of time testing how this was going to work, and also then again the CDC guidelines. If you are spraying that on, you don't necessarily have to wipe it off. You can just spray the surface. And even on wood, if you spray that, it dries fairly quickly, and then you wipe it with just a damp cloth. You have taken care of the situation. So we're able to use that on all of our surfaces. Otherwise, anything that has that at least, and I don't remember what it is, it was around 70% alcohol. I think that's gone down slightly with the recommendations, will work. But that's what we're doing for those items. And when it comes to, that's why I said the soft items and that's a little harder to do, because you don't want to soak a sofa with with sanitizer. But so that we're just actually quarantining for the time.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, do you want to mention anything?
No, the volume, the items that we get in are typically so small that I think trying to disinfect every item, it would be amounting to us trying to clean everything prior to it going out, and I don't know how feasible that is going to be. Again, I think we're going to rely more on the quarantining and the fact that if we do process anything, it is going to be sitting around for most likely days to weeks before retail can actually open back up to the public. So it might be an after fact that it's just quarantined for a period of time before it goes out.
Thanks, Greg. Jen, do you have anything else you want to mention for hard surface disinfectant?
No, Pete and I didn't get into that part of the question.
Okay. All right. Three questions came in that are kind of go back to our customer and staff and volunteer safety. So I'm going to jump back to that, and I'll kind of read all three of them together, and you can ask as a group. I will start with Jen first, just to mix it up. So how are you ensuring masks and sanitizers are readily available? Are you requiring customers or staff to wear masks? And then do you have any set limits on how many people can come in at a time, like 25% of the marshal business limit, fire marshal, excuse me, like Home Depot and Aldi have door monitors that stop people from coming in? We'll start with Jen.
Yeah, so I don't have specific answers to those questions from like the restore perspective, but I do know that as Pete's really looking to guidelines, he's looking across multiple retail organizations, and I think specifically that Target toolkit that came out earlier this week that is, that they're sharing kind of with more retail businesses is one thing of interest to him. And then with my Reuse Minnesota hat on, one of our reuse partners and sponsors has been the Steward Co-op, and they were a business in the Twin Cities who, really experienced kind of dealing with the COVID virus early on and implemented pretty strict practices to protect their staff and their customers. And I think they are also a model to look at and follow when it comes to a variety of those ways to keep their staff and customers safe.
Okay, thank you, Jen. We'll go back over to Steve, please.
Yeah, we've been fortunate in the fact that we've had a lot of volunteers sitting at home, and actually a lot of them started making fabric masks. So we've had a lot of volunteers dropping masks off to our buildings here in the last week, and we've actually provided all of our staff with a certain number of masks, and they take those home and they can clean them themselves, the cloth masks. We also keep a supply of disposable masks at our doors, so that when if we have a volunteer, like in the next week or so, when the volunteers start coming in, we're going to ask them to bring masks with them. If they don't have them, we'll have masks available for them to use. But the masks have probably been the biggest challenge as we've gone on, is finding a reliable source for those. But through a lot of different contacts, that a lot of us have as nonprofits, we've been fortunate enough to be able to find what we need, right now.
Great, thank you. And then Greg, for a retail perspective, what limits are you setting?
Yeah, so we're currently talking about the mask situation with guests. I mean, ideally we would ask that any guests coming into our building would wear a mask at least, until there's kind of an all clear, or even the idea of if you're sick. Well, again, if you're sick, we don't want you at the store at all. But again, hearing things that go on when people try to enforce that is a little concerning. So again, I think it would be the recommendation that we wear one, and we'd see what would happen if people are really testing that. Like Steve said, we're kind of in the same boat. We prior to COVID, people would donate masks to us in quantities, just willy-nilly. Whenever they buy a 24-pack, use one mask and donate the rest to us. So we have some of those to live off of for a while for our staff, but most of our staff have a mask of their own at this point, and we're going to start off with that. As far as trying to supply those, it's that kind of same situation. Where do you source them? That's it's not a big expense when it's a few people, but when you're talking hundreds and hundreds over days and days and days, it gets to be a huge expense. So to supply them to customers would be a big challenge. Things that we are thinking about as far as people, quantity, how many. I know this is going to be sad to a few people, and we're not expecting to open in May, but we had already decided to cancel our May Memorial Day sale. It's a 50% off sale. It typically doubles or triples the number of people that come into our building. So we right away thought that that's not a good idea to try and cram that kind of volume into our stores. We're also looking at to limit other kind of sales and deals. Again, those tend to be a driving factor for quantities of people into our store. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but saying that you don't want sales, you don't want people coming in, but I mean, you got to try and limit that somehow. I'm forgetting, was there some other piece of that question?
Was there a set limit of quantity of people that you could have in your store?
Again, we're kind of waiting for some governmental suggestions and guidelines on those. We thought about doing what some of the other stores are doing, where it's a maze and you have to follow a very specific path and you'd have to keep 6 feet in front. We'd hope that that'd be more of a last resort. There'd be a lot of work on our part to try and manage our store and turn it into some way of guiding people through it. So we're kind of waiting to see what that figure would be, and if it is suggested that only 25% people are in, then we'd obviously follow that. Have a person out front, like a lot of stores have been doing, where they're only letting so many in at a time. So I mean, that is our plan once there's some guidance to follow that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. All right, our next round of questions here. Really doing better together. How are we all helping each other out? How can reuse businesses work together to make this transition safer and more efficient for our sector? Are there strategies and processes that we could all adopt to strengthen the credibility of our reuse sector? We'll start there, and I'll start with Steve, please.
Okay, yeah, from our viewpoint, as I said before, we're, as Target did, most of us businesses, I mean, we're willing to share what we have. None of this is proprietary information. It's just, what do we need to do? What are the steps we need to do to plan? And I would just tell, each individual business, everybody's a little different, but you just got to think about each touch point you have, whether it's with customers or employees or volunteers or whatever that might be, is how is that going to be affected by this, and take it one step at a time. If you look at the overall big picture and you're trying to do it from this big giant, big business model, it gets very difficult, but you need to break that down and, to take a look at what is it going to need to do. And I think, what we've seen, from at least here in Minnesota, from the state, every step of the way, as we reopen more and more businesses, every business model has to look at that. We, as we wanted to become and be deemed an essential service, we had to be able to have that plan in place. Not that they're checking up on this, but if there were anybody that voiced concerns, we had to show what we were going to do to be able to take care of any of those questions that might come up. So that's what I would do. Is I would just, every single business just has to take a look at every part of that, have a plan so that they can put the public's mind at ease, their employees' minds at ease, that they're doing everything they can. I think all of us realize as this goes on long term, there's never 100% certainty that we can keep people from ended up contracting the virus, but we can do all that we can. And it's just trying to make sure the public feels comfortable coming back to our establishments, whether it's retail stores or like us, with clients coming in. They just have to feel as safe as they possibly can.
Thank you, Steve. I'll pass it over to Jen.
Well, when I was talking with Pete, and even though he's not able to be here today, he did say that conversations like this would be really, really helpful to continue. Just keeping the community together, thinking about kind of some of the evolving conversations that happen, even just some of the learnings as some of our businesses reopen and others are preparing for. So how can we help ease each other's movement through this? Also, Pete really suggested, he was very impressed with there was an article about 3 weeks ago, maybe in the Star Tribune, written by John Ewald. And so the more we can get as a group, as sectors out there in the public, just regarding who's open, what are we thinking about, sharing information with consumers about the progress and the fact that thrift stores and reuse businesses are still out there. That was really impactful to him too, and he feels like that would be good moving forward. And yeah, just making sure that we still view thrift stores as an option. So we've moved to a little bit of some single-use items, and within this current economy, our sector will be not only important for that decluttering, but also because we're an affordable solution for providing people with what they need.
Thank you, Jen. All right, Greg.
Yeah, I would just reiterate a lot that's been said. I have always appreciated Reuse Minnesota and other reuse businesses because they tend to understand a little bit better what we're going through, what our challenges are, what those obstacles are. It's a lot easier to get responses from a lot of reuse businesses about just ideas, suggestions, those kinds of things. So that's been something I've just really appreciated. I think it's something we continue to do, that whole collaborative piece of it all. The other thing I think that affects us so uniquely is that, our merchandise is mostly one of a kind, I guess more in the resale type of businesses. But, when you think about retail opening and selling online, it's easy for Target or, whoever to sell online. They have, granted, they can have a lot of products, but you post a product once and you just restock it, refill it, whatever. We post a product once and it sells. We just wasted that same amount of time posting an item, and we only had one of it. We can't restock it. We can't get you another one. It's done. So that's been our biggest struggle, trying to stay afloat on an online environment when, quantity of sales is everything to us. We need to get it out the door and in someone else's hands as fast as we can. But again, it's fun to hear this and hear ideas from other, again, resellers on how they're making that work. So, yeah.
Thank you, Greg. That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that about online. It's not as easy for reuse because they are so unique. That's why we love it. And then going into that, are there any strategies that we could all take to influence consumers' behaviors to make our world more efficient? We know reuse helps the environment to not use our natural resources up. Are there things that we can do as retailers, marketers, to help influence customers' behavior? Maybe I'll start with Jen on this one.
So taking off my Restore hat and putting on my Reuse Minnesota hat, I think that one of the first things that we can encourage customers to do is actually following the instructions on each organization's website and only trying to donate what they really want and can use. And from really thinking about like that highest best use of those reuse items. So rather than bagging everything together and giving it all to one organization that seems to accept and be able to use everything, there might be a highest best use for specific furnishings for bridging, and sticking to their list. They have a great list online of things that they accept, and we just heard from Steve that they're matching people with specific things that they really, really need in their new homes. And so I think sticking to lists, really thinking about what's the best use of this item. You know, if it's an outdoor, maybe there's option for consignment. So maybe repair layer is a better option for one piece, or maybe there's an antique store that's a better use for another piece. So like really kind of thinking more about what is your stuff that that's leaving your house and what should its really next step be.
Well said. Thank you, Jen. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, just, you know, as I think all of us have heard, there's been articles written, you know, that, yeah, during this time, people have been at home, they've been going through things, they've been looking at it, and we get the comment all the time, and it's like, my gosh, I didn't realize I had this much stuff just laying around the house that I don't use. You know, and that's really what the reuse economy is all about, is getting people to realize that, you know, they went out and they bought something brand new at a store that they used once, and now it's sitting in their house. You know, are there other options and other places that we can go get some of those items and not use up all the resources we do to buy something new all the time? So whether it's thrift stores, antique stores, consignment shops, you know, the rental business, you know, all of that type of thing is just really bring it home, take a look at what you have, you know, and start thinking about, you know, what do I really need? Because so much of the stuff just, we get in our house, it sits there, we never look at it, and now all of a sudden now we want to try and find a place to give it. And I appreciate what Jen said there. All of us have a specific list of the type of things we're looking to take and move on. And we really appreciate the efforts that people make and saying, hey, we want you to have something that is really usable for someone else, that is good, that can be resold and someone can make some use of. So we do appreciate people really taking the time to look at those lists and see what we really could use.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, anything to add to change consumer behavior?
To change, no, I'm in agreement though, that and granted I'm in a different position, but I see these gadgets on TV and you're like, oh, you know, maybe I should try that gadget. I'll guarantee you it's at our store right now, and you can come here and get it and not add to the, you know, whole nightmare of more and more. And then, yeah, the other thing I'm a little bit worried about is all the free time people had to clean out their house. They also had time to shop online, and who knows what they bought and that they're going to donate once we open. Yeah, those. So I think that was a little off the subject, but just my own thought. But I'm absolutely with Jen and Steve on just the guidelines for donating, and you know, I think bridging, correct me, Steve, if I'm wrong, but you might fix a few things, but a lot of other thrift stores can't take the time to fix, don't have the labor time. It's very expensive. We can't clean, we can't repair, we can't do all this. We don't repurpose things. We don't make art out of things that are junk to sell. We can't do those things. So if it's not usable, if it's broken, if you're saying to yourself, oh, someone could fix this, you know, those are things that you can't bring to us, we can't use. And just the other piece that's really a problem for us is Hennepin County, well, all the counties have hazardous waste collection sites, we can't take those items. We can't take paint and stains and glues. Basically, I say anything that's a liquid, we can't take it. We can't resell it. We now have to deal with it. And businesses are very different than residents. Residents, it's all free. It's all covered in your taxes. You can bring it to the drop-off centers. We can't. We have to manage it. So those are things to keep in mind anyways, as donating.
Thank you. A quick question while I have you, Greg. Going back to customer safety, are you adding any plexiglass around your cash registers?
We did add plexiglass. It is not going to be as fancy and beautiful as the grocery stores can afford, but it is a barrier between guests and the sales associate. We've also are planning on making our guests do all their own wrapping, bagging. We really only want our sales associate to collect the money. Once the guest touches the item, we don't ever want to touch the item after that. So it'll be up to them to bag it, wrap it. We'll just scan the tag and take their money.
And speaking of that too, I believe are plastic bags eliminated from your stores? How are you doing reusable bags?
So we do a variation of things. We do buy some bags because, believe it or not, we can run out of things every now and then. So we do tend to just have bags on site just in case. But for the most part, all those wonderful reusable bags that people buy at other retailers, they get donated to us the next day. So we pretty much collect those and use those along with paper bags and some other plastic bags that come through that we get. So we do use a lot of reused bags at our stores.
Great, thank you. A question came in, great question for all of us. Are there items that you don't want donated right now and items that you really wish people donated first? And how would you prefer phased donations? Do you want to start, Greg?
Sure. We would love gold, silver right now. That would be wonderful. No, one thing that we are thinking about, and we're always very selective on, because we can't sell, I shouldn't say that, because we're limited in what we can sell right now. Furniture, large items, things that are very bulky are things that we'd rather avoid taking right now. Again, it's that storage, that space. If we can't sell it to somebody, it's going to just be in our way at this point. Smaller items, clothing, and then small household items are all things that we can manage. And again, we have storage trailers that we can put those items on. So we haven't specifically said no large items. If people are calling us, asking us, we might refer them somewhere else with those larger items right now. But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. Steve, same question.
Yeah, no, we don't normally do that. We have our list, very specific list that we have, but it's on our website. We've tried real hard over the years to list the items that we can use. If it's not on that list, more than likely we aren't able to take it. And there are some exceptions that just the odd thing, a toy chest or something like that, no, we don't go looking for those. If it happens to make its way in the door, yeah, I'm sure we have one of our clients that would love to have something like that. But for the most part, it's what is on that list. And if it's on the list, we never have a time where we say, oh, no, we got too many, we can't take it. I mean, if it's on the list, we're going to accept it. Quality is the biggest thing, though. And that we have those quality standards, and I'm sure Greg would say that too. Like you said, we don't have volunteers at our wood shop, so we do a lot of times some minor repair. Something needs to be, a piece of furniture just needs to have it glued or nailed back together, something like that. Right now, we're being very particular on that type of thing that we're not able to because I don't have the volunteers to do that. But if it's on the list, we will take it.
Thank you. And Jen, can you comment on that?
No comment from a Habitat Restore perspective.
Okay, thank you. My last question as we wrap up here, unless more questions come in, how are you communicating to your customers or your clients and volunteers? Any tips for our other businesses about how you're engaging as you're reopening? Maybe Jen, I guess I'll call on you just because your answer might be short. You probably might not know.
Well, Pete and I didn't talk about this, but I would definitely say as an individual who's on the Habitat email list, I do feel like as an organization, they're continuing to, communicate with supporters. Of course, that's much larger than just the Restore communications. But I think all nonprofits, all businesses have a space right now to communicate with supporters and not back off in terms of letting everybody who supported you in the past know how important they are for the future.
Great. Thank you. Steve, do you want to take that one? Engagement?
Sure. Yeah, and we have a very set plan that we're following here. Yeah, obviously we opened on Monday this Monday this week. We did not shout it from the rooftops. We needed to sort of settle into what this was going to look like. And I'm sure Greg is sort of sitting there with the same thing. What's going to happen Sunday when we open? We did let a lot of people know. Obviously, all our volunteers knew. We have contacted most of our corporate partners and things like that. A lot of our realtors groups and that we deal with, they all know that we're open. We have a large email mailing list. That is, we're holding off on just blasting that out to everybody till next week, just so we don't get so overwhelmed this week. And social media, we haven't put it out there hugely, but we also know that a lot of our normal donors and that have been watching our website, have been looking for information, and they've seen that we're open. But there was a concern, as I'm sure with everybody that takes donations, that boy, the faucet turns on one day and we're overwhelmed. And so we're trying to manage that a little bit, but obviously there's a lot of different ways. And I appreciate, Reuse Minnesota getting that word out to our member businesses, letting everybody know on social media and that we have reopened. So.
Thanks, Steve. Greg, I know you've been doing a lot, or at least Molly has.
Yeah, Molly is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, social media is just the best, least expensive way to get the message and word out. So we do have a full-time person that's devoted to our social media. They've been doing, Facebook posts as well as some other email blast types of things. I think the other kind of neat benefit that we have is our stylists all also have a big following and group of people, and I think we're up to 6 or 7 stylists right now. So they have their whole world as well that we can often utilize to get messages out. But at the same time, we have to still utilize a lot of old school ways. It's amazing. I can't even tell you the dozens and dozens of phone calls that I had to follow up on, because it's people that don't have email, they don't have a computer, they don't have any other way to communicate with us other than to leave a message and have a call back. So I've been following up on it with a lot of people that way. But yeah, those are the main routes that we're going at this point. Signs on our buildings too. We're just keeping our signage on our doors as up to date as we can. Help folks.
Yes, on-site signage, very important. Great. Well, no other questions have come in. Any last comments you'd like to share? Okay, well, we're right at 12:30, so thank you for being so prompt and succinct in your comments. We so appreciate all you do, especially right now. You are essential to us, all of your stores and your services. Thank you all so much for being here and taking the time out of your very busy days. And we'll follow up with all of the attendees and send them notes and their recording. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.